Välkommen och god dag allesammans. Today we're going to speak a little bit about Rune Magic. I'm going to speak a lot more about this. I'm going to do a ton of videos on it. But I just wanted to give you some background information about the actual historical evidence that we have on it. So did the Vikings use it? Did the pre-Christian Scandinavians use it? If so, how did they use it? Well, as usual, we have a lot of uneducated idiots in the subject talking about rune magic, and they're just making up their own theories with no historical evidence whatsoever. Also, as usual, there are quite a few scholars and even high-level university professors who think that rune magic never existed in pre-Christian times, they just didn't do it, and it was just invented in the past couple hundred years of hippies and modern-age people trying to recreate something from the past. And that's stupid too, because there's a lot of sources we have. So as usual, both people are wrong, both the idiots and the scholars, and usually the truth is somewhere in the middle, like most aspects of Norse culture and religion and beliefs like that. So we're gonna go over this in this video here because we have a few actual sources. There's 7 actual sources that basically confirm that the pre-Christian Norse practiced rune magic, and I'm going to go over these right now. So I'm going to be speaking a lot more about rune magic in this channel, and I'm just making this video because I want to differentiate between speculation and theories, which there definitely is a lot of, but there is a lot of 100% true factual evidence. So in this video, I was just going to go over the 100% factual evidence that we have for rune magic in history, and then I'm going to take all the other types of evidence and speculation later on. So here we go. 7 pieces of evidence. First one, which most of you probably know of, is Germania by Tacitus. So this was the Roman historian Tacitus. He wrote when he first came in contact with the Germanic tribes in about the year 100. And he mentions something here that we are pretty sure is rune magic, and I'll go into that in another video in detail. But just to summarize, he said that the elder or a priest of a community would carve up slices of branches, and he would carve symbols on them and color them with red paint or red coloring, and then he'd pick 3 of them and throw them on the ground, and he would use that as divination to predict the future, and he would also use that to recommend some future advice for that person who he was casting the runes for. So this is probably what most of you have probably heard of, using runes for divination and how they were used like that. It's pretty simple. Now there are some scholars that question whether these symbols that Tacitus was speaking about in Germania was actually runes, because the record was a bit earlier on in time than the first rune inscriptions were dated to, but I'm convinced, and most other scholars are convinced, that Tacitus was talking about the runes at least a very early form of them in this, but we'll go into that in other videos as well. So second piece of evidence, number 2. We find in some rune inscriptions that people just use runes on repeat, but specifically writing and what they were doing in kind of a ritual way, like invoking the runes of some sort. So we have a lot of rune stones that say, for example, just an example, I, John, invoke the runes, fehu, 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 just on repeat like that, or something like I, Peter, or I, Bob, summon the runes, Gebu, 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 and just write the Gebu rune 3 times, and sometimes using bind runes in these, sometimes including two runes in the same symbol like that. So I'll go more into this in other videos as well, but inscriptions like this show pretty clearly that people, using the power of the runes or invoking the runes in writing, that they believe the runes to hold some kind of power like that. So, piece of evidence number 3, or group of evidence number 3, I should say, is different works in the Poetic Edda. In the Poetic Edda, there are some parts of it that clearly state and give instructions that runes could be carved into certain objects for magic. Sigurdrifimal is the best example we have of this, and he mentions a few different runes that can be carved on swords or on the front and back of your boat, and some other objects as well to give them magical power. That's probably the most famous and comprehensive source we have about this, but there are also other sources in the Poetic Edda that give mention of rune magic as well. So that's number 3 in the Eddas there. Also, we have in Havamal, most scholars agree that Odin clearly speaks about using the runes for divination, necromancy, and healing. That's from Havamal. That's pretty clearly that they were believed to hold some kind of power there. Piece of evidence number 5, I should say, a group of evidence, and that comes from the sagas, all of the sagas. There is a lot of mentions, very clear mentions of rune magic, that carving runes brought about some magic. Egil Saga is the best example of this, but also Ynglinga Saga is another one that how runes were used for divination, and Egil Saga was about runes being used for kind of magical power. So we have both in the sagas, we have runes both used as divination and for magical power. That's were definitely records of that. So piece of evidence number 6 was called the Vita Onsgari. And that's a biography of the Archbishop Ansgar. He writes about like lot casting, and he writes about some kind of throwing the dice down and using this as divination. It's a bit unclear, but most scholars agree that as well is a pretty clear example of rune magic, that the runes were what was marked on these die casting or lot casting little objects there. So that's number 6. Number 7, this will be the last one I go over today. This doesn't necessarily confirm magic use, but it confirms at least that the runes were used in something other than writing, that they were believed to have some sort of power that had nothing to do with language or writing at all. And that's on the rune inscriptions from pre-Christian times, spanning from about when we find the first runic inscriptions just before the year 200 all the way up until the Christianization around the year 1000. So about 800 years there or more. And almost half of all the rune inscriptions we find on different objects like swords, bones, rune stones, other objects like that, medallions, and it's all just a bunch of gibberish. Like I said, half of it, almost half, is absolute gibberish. Half we see clear language, clear sentences, all of that we know of, but almost half is just absolute gibberish. I'll put up one example here. The Lindholm amulet is the best example we have here, and this is what it reads. Asnbmut. So that's definitely not language, and we find, just like I said, we find this gibberish on almost half of all the rune inscriptions that we find from history, especially in the first few hundreds of years after the first rune inscriptions were found. Now, exactly what this gibberish could be, we'll cover that in other videos, but the use of magic here is definitely a possibility. It's definitely not language at all. So that's 7 pieces of evidence basically that I want to talk about here that show that the pre-Christian Norse believed in rune magic, and we will look at all of these in depth in some other videos on the channel, but I will also cover. We have basically 7 pieces of confirmed groups of evidence that I spoke about in this video that we're pretty sure speak about rune magic, but there are dozens, if not hundreds, of other examples of that lead us to believe that the pre-Christian Norse believed in rune magic as well. And I'm going to cover all of those in other videos. Just keep in mind that those other pieces of evidence is just kind of speculation. and it's open to interpretation and debate, but I just want to, like I said, make these 7 examples, pieces of evidence that show very clear, evidence that the runes were used for magic of some sort. Yeah, I'll go into that in other videos and show how the runes were used in pre-Christian times and also after the Christianization of Scandinavia as well, and even how we believe that the Icelandic magical staves that most of you know about probably originate and are evolved from the runes. So subscribe if you want. I'm trying to release videos almost daily, and we'll cover a lot more about this. Vi ses senere.